get us started here. Okay, can everyone see? So welcome everyone to our last session of the day for Admitted Students Week. My name is Shayna Peterson. I use she, her pronouns. I'm an admissions and recruitment specialist with the Office of Admissions. We're so excited to have all of you join us for another session today. This one is called St. Louis Community Engagement, Living and Learning in this Region. We have an amazing panel for you. We will get to introduce them in just a moment here. But I have the distinct pleasure of introducing our facilitator for the day. And then I will hand it over to him to introduce our panel. So it's a long one because he is super impressive. So Dr. Michael Jones is a native St. Louisan and is the Associate Director of Community Science at the Brown School's Race and Opportunity Lab, whose mission is to examine race, opportunity, and social mobility with an emphasis on informing policies, interventions, and interpersonal practice. Mike serves on the lab's administrative team for Homegrown STL, whose mission is to improve the economic life outcomes of Black boys and young men by serving as a regional intermediary focused on increasing the capacity and effectiveness of the agencies, programs, schools, and employers that serve them through strategic regional investments, increased capacity, and new coordination and collaboration standards informed by community science. Mike is passionate about his hometown's ability to increase our capacity by building the necessary infrastructure and support systems for marginalized populations. Michael is a graduate of St. Louis University, where he studied sociology, theology, and African American studies prior to earning his PhD in higher education administration. Michael is also completing his Master of Arts degree in Biblical Studies from Reformed Theological Seminary in Jackson, Mississippi. Prior to joining the Race and Opportunity Lab, Michael previously worked at the Gephardt Institute for Civic and Community Engagement, which is at Washington University. There, he cultivated student leader and learning opportunities that partner with K-12 schools and local nonprofits. So we are so excited to have you as our facilitator today, Mike. I would like to invite you to just introduce yourself. You are a native St. Louisan, so you've been here for a long time. Would love for you to share what you enjoy most about the city.
So thank you for that introduction, Shayna. And I'm excited to be here with you all this evening. As Shayna said, my name is Mike Jones. I use he, him pronouns, and I am a native St. Louisan, hence the shirt. Today is a St. Louisan, if you will, holiday. So for those of you who are joining us from across the nation, we welcome you to our virtually to our city. And today, is opening day for the St. Louis Cardinals. And so it's an unofficial holiday in the city, so hence the Cardinals jersey. And we are excited this year in particular because it's the first year in 2 years that we get to gather downtown at the Cardinals Stadium to celebrate our city. And so I'm excited, and I'm excited that you all are here. And I'm more excited because we have a stellar panel today who's going to join us, and you're going to hear from them and hear their personal stories and narratives. Some are graduates, some are university communities, but I'm excited about today. And so, Shayna, do you want to go into this slide deck, or we're going to introduce the panel first? There we go. Yeah. And so if we can go in order that's listed here, starting with Beth, and after Beth, Miss Cynthia, Elizabeth, Lewis, and Sonia, in that order, and then we'll go right into the questions from there.
All right. Hi, everyone. My name is Beth. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm in my second year here. I'm a dual MSW MPH student. I'm really interested in working in medical settings to reduce health disparities. And actually this year I've become really interested in how data can be used to reduce bias. So that's where I'm at and excited to be here and talk to y'all.
Good afternoon. My name is Cynthia Williams. I am the Assistant Dean for Community Partnerships. Welcome to all of our students across the world who have joined us this afternoon. I'm also sending greetings to my colleagues as well as the panelists. I also am a longtime member of the Brown School and a lifetime member of St. Louis. So I'm very happy to be here for this occasion.
Hello, everyone. My name is Elizabeth Fuchs. I use she, her pronouns. I too am a lifetime member of St. Louis. I love how you put that, Cynthia. Thank you. Really proud to be here to talk to you about field. So I'm from the Office of Field Education here at the Brown School. I teach social policy analysis and evaluation, and I also teach the social work practice with LGBTQIA populations. I'm really looking forward to connecting with you. Welcome to St. Louis. Welcome to Admitted Students Week. And I look forward to connecting.
Hello, everyone. My name is Louis Damani Jones. I use he, him, his pronouns. I'm the Voter Engagement Coordinator at the Gephardt Institute for Civic and Community Engagement, an office here at WashU. Also, I am an alum of the Brown School, so I'm amongst these distinguished folks on the panel who also are as well. And I'm honored to be here with you today and share this space with you all.
Hi, everyone. My name is Sonia Sequeira. I am the Associate Director for Community Engagement at the Gephardt Institute. I work with Louis, and I graduated from the Brown School with my dual degree of MSW and PH in 2013. I'm actually pretty new to my position. I've been back at WashU now for 2 months and moved from Atlanta after working at the CDC and in neighborhood community development.
Great, thank you all so much. Great panel. I'm so excited to hear what everyone has to say. Mike, do you want to lead us into this?
Sure. So we're going to give a few brief slides that kind of highlight the overview of our city. And Shayna and I are kind of going to tag team back and forth from each slide, just highlighting some few points. And feel free, as you hear things that perk your interest, to provide some questions or comments in the chat. And we'll go into breakout rooms in a little bit that allow you the space to talk one-on-one or two-on-two with this group of amazing panelists after we have some question and answer sessions. All right, so here's some regional population numbers with St. Louis as it relates to our city. So we're right at about 2.8 million people within the total population within the St. Louis city. And within the state of Missouri, we're right at 6.2 million people. Household with primary language other than English in St. Louis City is 9.7, while in the state is 6.3. High school graduation rates are pictured below at 87% in the city and 89% overall in the state. And a huge piece where some of our Brown School faculty members focus on in terms of poverty in St. Louis City is higher at 20%, and in the state of Missouri overall at 12.1. Persons without health insurance is right at 12.6 in the city and 12% in the county. And the leading cause of death in both the I'm saying city and county, I apologize. We'll get into that in just a few seconds, but the city and state rather is heart disease, leading cause of death in both. In 2020 election results for Democratic and Republican parties leading in the St. Louis City at 82% and 16% Republican, whereas in the state, 41% Democratic and 56% Republican. Non-white residents breakdown will be a little bit more in depth on the next slide, but we're sitting in St. Louis City at 53% and the state of Missouri right at 20%. You can go ahead, Shayna.
Yeah, great. So again, this is just to kind of give everyone a starting place of like, this is what St. Louis is about. This is what the state of Missouri is about. I think a lot of these stats make it a really interesting place to live and a really interesting place to do this work in social work, public health, and social policy. So we wanted to include a specific slide about the racial breakdown in the city of St. Louis and in the state of Missouri. So As you can see, it's pretty different in the city versus the state of Missouri. In the city, the population of white residents who identify as just white alone is 44.7, whereas in the state of Missouri, it's 79.1. People who identify as Black or African American make up 45.3% of our city, and only 11.8% of the state of Missouri. And then American Indian, Alaskan, and Alaska Native residents are 0.3% of the city, 0.6% of Missouri. Asian population is 3.6% in the city, 2.2% in the state of Missouri. People who identify as Native Hawaiian and other Pacific Islander are 0.1% in the city, 0.2% in the state of Missouri. People who identify as biracial or more make up 2.6% of the city and 2.4% of the state. And then finally, Hispanic or Latino are 4.2% of the city and 4.4% of the state. And like I said, we thought this was important to include just because a lot of the work at the Brown School centers around racial equity. Mike, would you like to talk a little bit about your work with the Race and Opportunity Lab?
Sure. So within the Race and Opportunity Lab, we focus on the upward mobility of Black males within the St. Louis City and County region. And so our goal is to make sure that Black males are equipped with all the tools that they need in order to become successful citizens. And so we believe that if St. Louis is going to be the region that we have all the intention of being, we have to really do well by our Black males. And this was led by Dr. Sean Joe, who's our fearless leader on the break of the killing of Mike Brown back in 2014 in Ferguson. So we're committed to that work along with dozens of other labs and professors at the university who are committed to different pockets of work within the St. Louis City. And so as I was mentioning before about the whole St. Louis City County sort of makeup, our university is unique because we are positioned in both St. Louis City as well as St. Louis County. And we're positioned that way because our city is divided in terms of the city and county makeup. And so it can get a little complicated. We actually could teach an entire course on the makeup of St. Louis City and County. But our St. Louis neighborhoods, we have 79 different neighborhoods within our region, and each with its own distinctive style and characteristics. And I'll add to that food. And so if you get the opportunity, you have to go visit our St. Louis neighborhoods. They all, as mentioned, has their own distinctiveness about them, and very active community organizations, associations. And what you'll find is that some of these neighborhoods are on the rebound, meaning they've been dilapidated for decades, and there are reasons behind that. And other of these communities are thriving in many ways, and while others are on their way to renewal. And the cool thing about being a Brown School student is that you're going to get the opportunity to explore all of these dynamics within our region and really get your feet wet, if you will, about solving some of these challenges that we have within the region.
Yeah, and so this is just the map again, and we wanted to point out a couple of really places that are going to be important to you as students and where you are geographically in the city and in the region. So the shaded gray area is just the city of St. Louis. And so you've heard a couple of people say that we're on the city-county line. So you can see the Brown School is right there, right on the city-county line. The School of Medicine at Washington University is right on the other side of Forest Park here. So a lot of you might be doing volunteer things or practical opportunities at the School of Medicine. So it's right across Forest Park. If you were in the previous session, you heard all those students talk about Forest Park and what a great place it is. So that's the huge rectangle that's right there in the middle of the city. I will add that it is the biggest urban park in the country, even bigger than Central Park in New York. So definitely my favorite place in St. Louis. And Mike, do you want to finish out this one?
Sure. So our university is in a unique space. We sit in St. Louis City, in Clayton, as well as University City. So that's 3 municipalities that our university is positioned in. That's 3 police departments, three government organizations. And so again, the cool thing about working at Brown and being a Brown School student is that you get access to all of these public servants who are at your disposal in many ways. And so I'm excited about this. And I'm also excited about these panelists to get into some questions. And so as a reminder, if you're tuning in, please, we welcome you to put some questions in the chat, and we'll do our best to answer those questions or comments that you may have for this amazing panelist. And so I'll start with Beth for the first question, if you don't mind. Not to put you on the spot, Beth, but we're going to start with you. And panelists, if you can, we can just chime in. And if you have anything to input, great. And if not, we will move on to the next question. All right, Beth. So as well as living and learning, thinking about living and learning in both contexts, what should incoming students know about the context of St. Louis? So what should incoming students know about the context of St. Louis?
Yeah, so I think people often come to the Brown School with certain stereotypes or like specific things they've heard about St. Louis, but I think it's really important to keep in mind that it's so much more than things that you hear, and it's really important to experience that for yourself. There's a lot of complexities, a lot of rich history in St. Louis, which is also important to know. And I think for me, as someone who's interested in working in medicine spheres, recognizing the history that segregation has played in medicine in St. Louis. So St. Louis hospitals were historically segregated. And then actually, I think in the 1940s, Black leaders really advocated for the creation of a hospital where Black medical professionals could teach and Black patients could go. And so that created the Homer G. Phillips Hospital, which is still around today. It's now a senior living center, obviously desegregated. But that's a really interesting piece of history for me, working with community members at Practicum in a medical context, just to think about how the community has been impacted by segregation over the decades and how that space impacted some of the people that I work with today.
And I chime in there that I really view St. Louis as a microcosm of a lot of the issues across our country that are related to social work and public health. And in all its vibrancy and complexity, that makes for a really vital part of your education at the Brown School, that in exploring the city, it really complements a lot of what you're learning.
I'll chime in to say too that I'd like very much for students to consider lift up your eyes sometime, because the architecture in St. Louis is outstanding. St. Louis is also known for its brick and its architecture. Do a little research about the St. Louis bricks. What I like about that history is that we had to stop exporting our bricks to other parts of the country because it was so sought after. So I'm challenging you to do some research on your own about St. Louis brick, as well as why the city of St. Louis had to move to brick. I'll just give you a hint. You know, it had to do with having a fire, right? Much like San Francisco. So look up that piece of history about St. Louis brick. And also, just to chime in on the other colleagues, we do have in Missouri and St. Louis, we do have a history of legislation that also has been very significant across the country. Some of it good and some of it really bad. So I just want you to know that we have a good mixture of that type of history as well.
Well, and to follow up there with, since you brought up one of my favorite topics, which is the legislature, as somebody who works very closely with the Missouri State Capitol and the folks in both the House and the Senate, I have in field education, and I have a lot of students who will coming from the coasts, mostly East or West Coast, who are used to working on policy with populations that we work with. And usually those policies are a little bit easy, have a passage to passing that are a little bit easier than here in Missouri. So here in Missouri, we do have a Republican held supermajority, which means that our governor is Republican, our House and Senate are both Republican led and ruled. And so that can be very challenging sometimes to pass legislation that impacts the populations that we serve. And a lot of the work that we do is to work on both sides of the aisle, is to use our skills to build relationships and to facilitate that policy change through relationships with folks. And so if you can do policy change here, you can do it anywhere. That's my advice to you, is that we are going to really teach you how to work on those relationships and work across the aisles to build relationship and capacity for policy change.
Awesome. And Lewis, you got to speak from it from the Gephardt perspective about touching on Elizabeth's points about what the Gephardt does in speaking across both aisles and how they engage students in that way.
Oh, wow, you put me on the spot. Well, I'll Sonia, of course, Sonia is also at the Gephardt Institute. She can speak well for us. And you know, we're at a unique juncture, as was discussed in St. Louis, as a metropolitan region, you know, situated within the state of Missouri, a kind of bi-state kind of developmental region, also with Illinois. We're kind of at the center of the country. We're at the center of North and South and East and West, and we're an older industrial city, and that comes with some also unique challenges, opportunities, and a lot of those conversations are happening through Brown School faculty with them, and there's a lot of opportunities to investigate some of those questions. Suburban growth, exurban growth, and what that means for cities and regions like St. Louis. I think all these questions are really important, and so that context is critical. Now I invite you, when you come and join the community here, to explore those nexuses. Go out to some parts of the state of Missouri that you may not have otherwise visited. Go out to the east side, visit East St. Louis, visit the north side, North County, visit other areas, go into the different neighborhoods of St. Louis and encounter communities. We have some immigrant communities that have come over here, learn the history of some of those, like the Bosnian community in different parts of St. Louis. Yeah, just get invested in this time that you have here, in the special context that you'll have here as well.
Thank you, Louis. You know, I'm getting excited. I guess it's this conversation about St. Louis that excites me, but the panelists are touching on so many important points. And I do have to shout out one of our alum organization based off what Beth has talked about over the Homer G. Phillips Hospital. So Google For the Ville organization. It's an opportunity where you go visit Homer G. Phillips Hospital in that neighborhood and see the revitalization work that they're doing over there. Next question, Elizabeth, I'm gonna start with you if that's okay. How are the Brown School and Washington University engaged within the St. Louis community through Practicum, volunteer opportunities, and other community partnerships? Can you kick that off for me?
I would love to. Thank you. Great question. Okay, so I am a St. Louisan. I grew up in this town, and I will tell you that my understanding of Washington University and the Brown School is, you know, people are invested in the community and doing the work. And when you go into community, you may hear a different story. We have done historically as an institution, maybe not been so great with some of the communities in the surrounding areas. We might not have always shown up in ways that promote the voices of community. And so Washington University and community is really working to repair and restore community relationships with many of our communities of color, specifically in the surrounding areas. We are working through, I don't even know how many institutes right now the Brown School has where we're invested in community, doing research here in the community. I think last count I heard, I don't know, I don't even want to give something. I heard like there's 16 or maybe even better of community of research institutes right here in the Brown School that are doing that work. And as far as field, so I would like to talk a little bit about field education. So in the summer of 2020, the Office of Field Education implemented in our Educational Learning Agreement, which is your ELA, a racial equity component. And so every student who does a practicum with the Brown School, which is all of you, will be assessing the organization that you work for the racial equity, for the impact that they're having in the city. And so we're currently working to really gain an understanding of what work is being done to improve outcomes for folks in this area. How can we be a part of it? How can we shape and change the narrative and invest in our communities that invest so much in us in this area? So I think that's how I would answer that question.
Mike, restate the question for me, please.
Sure, Miss Cynthia. because this is directly pertaining to the work that you do as well. How is the Brown School community and Washington University as a whole engaged within the St. Louis community through practicum, volunteer opportunities, and community partnerships?
Okay, I will answer that question. I'm happy to say that there's a little history about our current involvement. In 2014, as you might recall, and I like for students also, if you don't know, to look up the history behind Michael Brown and Ferguson, Missouri. Michael Brown was killed in 2014 through police violence. As a result of that, our then dean asked the Office of Field Education, where were we positioned in the most affected communities around Ferguson? And we had to do some reevaluation. As a result of that, the Brown School at Washington University in St. Louis reprioritized through geographic areas. So North City, North County, South City, and East St. Louis are the priority areas for engagement at the Brown School. That's not to the exclusion of other areas or geographic areas in St. Louis, but those are primarily the most, the poorest communities, with the highest health issues, as well as education issues. So the hope is that we were repositioned, and we have through Practica, through faculty research, and through the Brown School's investment. As a result of our engagement, we have worked with what we call a model organization to community model. In other words, the Brown School has opted not to go into community and reinvent the wheel, but to acknowledge the work that is already being done by organizations that have been established and have a great reputation and outcomes for communities that have been impacted in those regions. So that is just a little bit of the model and the engagement of the Brown School. The other thing that I wanted to say to students a little bit about me, because I'd like for you to do some research about this. I am also from a little community in Missouri that is the oldest Black community in Missouri, and it's called Kinloch, Kinloch, Missouri. You would do well to do some research about that area, as well as how eminent domain was used to take over that Black community by our existing airport region.
And I can add to that from the Gephardt perspective. So the Gephardt Institute works across the university, both the undergraduate and graduate levels. And the university has a new initiative called the St. Louis Initiative, and it's looking at ways that we can be not only in St. Louis, but for and with. And from the Gephardt perspective, that's really looking at the ways that students can engage with the community, be aware of opportunities in St. Louis and what's going on. And that's everything from programming that is looking, it's called In the Lou, that deals with specific St. Louis issues, and our graduate impact forum of issues that graduate students are looking at specifically, but also at a higher level of student readiness to enter community as well. And right now that's focused on some of our undergraduates partnering with different community organizations, but also really drawing those connections between all of the ways that WashU works with different community organizations. And so that we're all aware of the different ways that the university affects communities, given that it's a big campus and there's a lot of different partnerships going on.
I just want to, there's so many great things mentioned. I have little to add. However, I will highlight what was just mentioned, the Graduate Impact Forum, which is here at the Gephardt Institute, and will be a great opportunity for folks coming to this new community to get engaged, to learn about community and community partnerships. We'll have speakers and other people come to help to introduce you, because some folks may be like, oh, there's so many things going on. There's so much I've heard already. And so it'll just be a community of growth and kind of getting to hear from community. And that could be an important segue to learning how to get involved yourself.
Thank you, Louis. Did I hear from all the panelists? I think I did.
I can also add a little bit.
Okay.
Yeah, so I think my first practicum opportunity was kind of an interesting example of universities partnering with the community, because it was with a organization called Life Outside of Violence, which is actually under WashU Institute for Public Health. But basically, it's a partnership between all 4 level 1 trauma centers in the St. Louis region. And it was interesting to see like first line gun violence intervention programs within the hospital. But I think the most important part of that practicum experience was seeing how hospital social workers partnered with community members who were also violence interrupters and able to really intervene in the community. And so I think that was just a really interesting opportunity and kind of an example of working within the community, not just from the academia side.
Appreciate that context, Beth. I do. And it's so many important points that are going on here. I appreciate Elizabeth, you talking about the complicated role that the university plays within community historically. And one of those complicated roles, Ms. Cynthia touched on with the Kinlock piece, a good piece of literature that you can look up now. I challenge you to Google him. His name is Dr. John Wright, who writes about disappearing neighborhoods in the city. He's a scholar who writes this work, but we have a lot going on. And because she's on my picture, I have to shout her out, Jamie Hennessy, who was responsible for a lot of this work early on over at the Gephardt. Shout out to you, Jamie. Appreciate your contributions to the university. But we've got one more question before we dive into this deep dive. And if we can we hear this from the perspective, and Beth, I'm gonna tap you again as a student and then on to the alumni of the Brown School community to talk about this question from a student perspective, if you will. How can students stretch themselves to get involved in the community, especially in ways that break down divides, even though that you might only be here for 2 years? And so, Beth, if you could talk about this from the student perspective. So what ways can students sort of break down these divides? And I'm gonna also tap Lewis and Miss Cynthia and Elizabeth and Sonia to talk about what are some ways that students can sort of overstep their boundary in terms of these divides. Can we go from both those perspectives?
Yes, I feel like there's definitely a lot kind of to unpack in that, but I think something that we talked about in my community-based system dynamics class that was really valuable is this idea of value and harm. And there was this quote that's like, harm avoidance is not a justification for declining to do work. And so asking yourself, kind of what is the comparison? Is it like a perfect process? Because it will never be perfect. And so definitely like being open to being uncomfortable, to having conversations, and to recognize and call out and name harm when it is caused, but also see what you can do to move forward. And I also think having courage to share a little bit about yourself, whether it's like working with people at your practicum or your colleagues or people in the community, because people really latch onto that. And I think building relationships is one of the most important things for me as a student that has really allowed me to feel like I am a member of the community and I'm not just this external piece that's here for a short time.
I'll jump in and say you have to come out of your dorm room or come out of your residence. You have to be willing to travel and to get out and to see different parts of St. Louis, including the rest of Missouri. We have wonderful parks. We have wonderful bike trails and walking trails. We have wonderful camping sites. But if you made up your mind, all you're going to do is keep your nose in your books. That's a great mistake. Another thing I would say, don't be ashamed to seek out people who look like you. It's okay. As a student, I am encouraging you. Don't make the mistake of not seeking out professors that look like you or seeking out other student groups that look like you, and then expand outward. It's okay. The last thing that I will say to you is, don't believe everything you're told, just like you don't when you're at home. See for yourself, experience different foods in different parts of St. Louis. Of course, even when I travel, I always like to have somebody with me, but I don't need to travel in a herd or a pack. It's okay. You just use your intuition, and when your gut says don't go there, don't go there. But don't believe the hype about any part of St. Louis. St. Louis for me is home. It feels like home, and I know the difference. I did a little bout in California, and I made a decision that the culture there, cool for anybody else, but it was too much rock and roll for me. I needed some more country, so I came back to St. Louis. So every city has its own culture and its own feel. So come out of those behind that door and get involved in the community and environment that's around you.
Wow, I don't know if I can follow that. So I have two words, exploration and investment. So you want to explore, explore academically, you want to explore, send emails to different professors, different research centers, see how you can get plugged in, exploring academically. You want to explore by going out to different areas, going out to visit our amazing parks like Lone Elk Park and some other great places that we have. You want to explore in all those ways. And then you want to invest. You want to find things that you can really spend time going deep on. You want to find places that you can really find, do a deep investment in. Like here at the Gephardt Institute, we have opportunities for that, but at so many other places we have opportunities for that, where you can start to understand a problem, the complexity, and dive into that. And that is where I find people get a lot of the stimulation and the richness, and they start to see the multi-sides and the generalizations to other places as well. And they see how really St. Louis is an icon for so many issues in our world, not in our country as well, but even our whole world. So I would say explore and then invest. Definitely don't skimp out on the exploration though, and go straight to investment. Explore, find, be led, and kind of connect with people also outside your comfort zone.
From a perspective of time, right? Like I work with so many students who are like, I don't have time. Where am I going to volunteer? What do you mean? I'm going to have to do this too. I got to work. I got to take care of my kids. And people are like, where am I going to fit this in? So I encourage you to think about Practicum as your opportunity to invest, to Lewis's point, into this region. What are the skills that you're hoping, before you applied to grad school, there's something that came up in your world. You're like, I need more skills to facilitate this change, whatever that outcome is that you're hoping to see. And so using this time while you're here to invest in those skills while also investing in community. We have so many organizations from the summer of 2014 that were birthed that are incredible activist organizations. And so also thinking about your role. What role do you want to play as you come to community? So I encourage you to look into the roles of the social the eco map, the change, roles of social change, and how you fit into that. And yeah, it's going to be like, it's a big 2 years. You're going to be busy. It's going to change you. And that's the point. It's supposed to break you open and help you think about things in a different way. And so knowing that you have support in Office of Field Ed, with your faculty, with staff, with your fellow classmates. But I would encourage you to use that time for Practicum to invest in community, doing the work and learning from the folks who are out there doing it. That's the go and be above and beyond, I think, piece you might have been looking for, Mike.
Appreciate that. Did we hear from everyone? Oh, thanks. Did we hear from you, Sonia?
Cynthia and Lewis pretty much covered it, but I think overall, this idea of being really curious and being a learner, both in your classes, and if you have that same attitude to how you approach learning about the St. Louis community, you can really just learn so much from this city if you take that approach.
And I'll just insert one more thing, and that is you will find out at the Brown School that we talk about race a lot. So don't get bored with it. Don't get tired of it. We talk about it a lot. You saw from the statistics that was shared with you that the city is diverse, but it's primarily Black and white. So those issues are going to come up organically. What I would say to you in order to prepare for those conversations is relax. You don't even have to research it. You're going to learn a lot about it. But these are topics that are transferable across the country, and has already been said, across the world. So I just want to prepare you for that. And instead of taking the position that Why do they talk about race so much? Because it matters. And so I'm bringing it up to you because that context will become very important to you in your studies at the Brown School, regardless of the program that you enrolled in.
That's right, Miss Cynthia. What a better way to end the panel on a statement like that, right? I love Miss Cynthia. She's a gem to our Brown School community, keeps it 100, right? All the time. And so if we can do this, if we can pull back up the slide deck, well, first off, future Brown School students, can you give this panel a round of applause virtually? Can I see some hearts in the comments? Can I see some hand claps? There they go. They're coming. They're coming. Thank you all so much for your insight. But it's not done yet. We're not done yet. We're going to go over to the next part and really give some context for some of these questions. And I'm going to set some ground rules, if you will, for the next portion of our panel. And so we're going to have some breakout rooms grouped in room 1. It'll be Lewis and Beth. Room 2, I'll be holding it down with Sonia. In room 3, Cynthia and Elizabeth, until Miss Cynthia, I know she has to leave shortly, but we'll get a few more minutes with Miss Cynthia. And here's the ground rules for the panel. These will be safe spaces. These will be safe spaces, safe spaces for you to ask the questions, for feedback. We're going to make sure you introduce yourself, get to know our Brown School community, let us know where you're from. And we just ask that if the room is crowded, that you just join another room. All right. And some of the questions that we want to look at is, what are some of your fears? What excites you about your future tenure at the Brown School community? And what can you bring to this community? What do you hope this community will bring to you? And we'll do our best to really address these questions in the amount of time of, how much, Shayna, are we working with?
So this session is until 2:15. So, I mean, we have about 20, 25 minutes, depending on how the conversation goes.
All right. So 20, 25 minutes to really have a deep dive into these sessions. And so what we're going to do now is we're going to have breakout rooms. It's going to be led by the admissions team, and go into breakout rooms and continue to keep those questions coming in those sessions. We'll see you in a bit.